It's my delight to introduce Melanie Courtright, Mike Stevens, to join this session. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit of an introduction, first from Mike and then Melanie. Then the three of us are going to discuss that a little bit, and then we're going to look for questions from the audience. So first of all, Mike, your POV.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about the coming wave of empathetic chatbots. So you've just seen the demo of Yasna. It interacts with participants in ways that are kind of quite new and fresh. But I think what's going to happen over the next couple of years will be quite dramatically, different to what we've seen so far. Because if you go right back to the origins of AI development in the 1960s, we kind of established that humans have this latent tendency to anthropomorphize technology. So in MIT in the mid-60s, they built the first kind of modern chatbot, and it was very rules-based. It was much more of a, if-then-then type structure. But people who interacted with it, it was a kind of, a mock-up of a psychology advice tool. They all felt that they were talking to someone, and they wanted to talk to it more. They wanted to kind of give more feedback. They wanted to confess more secrets and so on. So, what's happening now, if I gave birth to what's known as the ELIZA effect, so, our tendency to kind of build relationships with machines. What's happening now is we've got, large language models that are actually outperforming professional humans in their ability to generate empathy. So there's been a couple of case studies in, I think, a Psychology Review, something like that, where the advice that was given by ChatGPT was consistently rated as more empathetic and, better quality than professional advice columnists. So, what I think is likely to evolve is, much deeper relationships that people build with these AIs. You look at tools like Replica, Character.ai. There's a whole bunch of not safe for work ones where people are talking dirty to the AIs, but they're building relationships with these products, and they get very stressed, if they try and change the rules. And I think where we're going to see some big developments is in taking these large language models into what's called this multimodal world, because empathy, think about this in a research context. Empathy is not just about listening to the words that you say and responding to to what you've told me. There's a lot of other non-verbal cues. There's a lot of things that come from kind of like vision or detecting intonation, emotional response. Multimodal models combine language, video, image input, and they're going to become much more sophisticated at replicating what we think of today as the preserve of qualitative researchers. So there was a question of which was, is it text only? So right now, you've got a kind of text to text dynamic. Inca, some other tools like that. You've got the emergence of tools that are voice to text response. I can record my input and then I'll get a text question replied to me from the chatbot. We're going to see that evolve quite quickly from voice input to voice feedback as the models get better, and then ultimately like video to video with avatar generation on the fly. So tools like Synthesia that will be much more responsive. So I guess what I'm seeing is a world where the scope to do qualitative research at scale and much lower cost is going to open up to a lot more people. I think the space for bad qualitative researchers will start to shrink, even if we defend the space for very good qualitative researchers. And we're going to see this real blending of surveys with much more depth and texture and kind of nuanced insight that we've always thought previously was the preserve of humans. So I think we're about to see over the next few years a big explosion in simulated empathy, I guess, from these types of conversational research tools.
Thanks, Mike. And Melanie, you've got a different angle on the human to bring to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be a yes and angle. So I'm enthusiastic about the potential. AI is seeing a lot of success in insights already in data analytics and processing, enabling scale, automation, interviewing and field work, enhancing research accuracy, content, creativity. There's a lot of success going on, and the successes are driving the very things that people have talked about with increasing speed, better output, efficiency. But there's also this part of the process that is always going to require a human in the loop. And as you look at where governance is going, where regulation is going, where the codes are going of your associations, they're all going to have this element of human in the loop in them. And the reason for that is because, well, empathy is important in interviewing, as we've talked about, but empathy has to be taught, and someone has to teach the machine how to empathize, what to empathize, where to empathize. And there are a lot of other considerations too. So specifically, when you think about human in the loop and all the areas where we're using AI, and we'll use it in the future, and technology in general, humans bring contextual understanding, ethical and fit considerations, critical thinking, decision-making, trust and accountability, and continuous improvement. And for those things to be in place, you will need persistent human in the loop. We've said this about every transition that we've done, by the way, in our world. These are the same things that we said about the transition to online, and the same reasons of speed and efficiency and having researchers focus where they're most valuable was the reason we went from, in person to phone, and phone to online, and now online to much more technology and AI enabled. But so we need the humans to learn from what the mistakes we've made in the past, and to teach the technology, to oversee the technology, and to make sure that the technology is generating responsible research. So when I talk about contextual understanding, AI can process a lot of data, but it may lack that nuanced understanding of context that a human possesses. You think about when you go into even ChatGPT or some of the other models right now, you ask it a question, you have to ask it again, and you ask it a different way, and you ask it, and you give it context that allows its answer to get better and more fit for what you're trying to use it for. We'll always need humans for those kind of context elements. Ethical and fit, governance is changing, society is changing, what we find appropriate is changing. So you'll always need humans to look at the output. AI systems can unintentionally generate biased, incorrect, or even unethical insights due to the data that they're trained on. And so the human in the loop can identify, mitigate, teach, and ensure that the decisions based on AI are fair and responsible. Critical thinking. When you think about, somebody was asking it earlier, said earlier in the chat, I've never seen an AI element that can answer all the questions, that can go as deep analytically. That's because humans are so innately curious, and we have to teach the AI and the technology to be that curious. We have to teach it to iterate, and it will get better and better. But even so, as humans, our brains will always go, but what if, and what if, and what if, and we'll build that sort of what if capability into, but we'll spend our time what ifing and teaching, and not actually writing the code to try to do a complex analytical task. Decision making, AI can provide recommendations, but the final decision often requires human judgment. Is the trade-off right? Is the timing right? Is the investment right? Can my company actually do this? That kind of decision making often needs to be a human making it. And because of you've got humans all along the path that are overseeing and in the process and in the loop, it builds that trust and accountability, and it continuously improves the models. So from a technology and an evolution, I'm very bullish and enthusiastic about what these capabilities are going to bring to our profession in the future. But I'm also really excited about the humans in the loop, constantly, persistently overseeing data collection, data management, analytics, and applying everything that we've learned to build trust and improvement.
Absolutely. So we've got a few interesting comments already. So I'm going to dive into a couple of those and see what you both think. So one in the chat stream, my current experience with AI probing, that it is really easy for them to start probing outside of the bounds of the question, which can potentially derail the rest of the survey when you're holding specific info to be revealed later. And this strikes me as a problem of the better the AI gets, if it's not being controlled by the human, the worse this problem could be of it following things that seem to be interesting to the participant, especially if it's being empathetic. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing focus groups years and years ago, and inevitably in those interviews, it was about whipped cream. And so inevitably the conversation would start to go in a direction you didn't want it to go. And so you would have to bring the conversation back, and humans are just innately sort of geared to chase rabbits. I don't know if that's a phrase that works globally, but to just follow their train of thought. It takes a really skilled moderator to keep people on track and to bring it back, to tie it back, and to keep the focus. And so I think that a human in the loop will have to teach the tools to do that. And it can be taught, but there's a lot of data that it can pull from, and I'm sure that it's enjoying pulling from that data, and it'll have to be taught to keep people on track.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of these tools are learning, as in they're adding features for things like targeted probes or giving it more context against a specific question, so that you can almost train the model much more specifically for the things that you actually want to get. But you're right. I mean, it's a good point about derailing with with taking people off track, because these things, when they're built entirely around language models, they're built for sort of creativity and sparking off, rather than necessarily staying within set guardrails. So, it's something to be aware of for sure.
So one of the issues around the human in the loop is that a lot of what is currently in AI is from the people who programmed it, who tend to come from a subsection, a perfectly valid subsection of humanity, but not an exhaustive. And there's lots and lots of types of people who are not involved in the creation of AI. Does that raise challenges, and how might we tackle it?
I mean, I'll go. I think it absolutely raises challenges. I think there's lots of papers that demonstrate, it's the inability of some of the big foundation models to really grasp cultural nuance, in different languages, different parts of the world, that it's, the risk of flattening things into a singular view of the world because of the training data and because the way the model's built is very real. And I think there's a sort of bigger point about, when you're doing research, especially qualitative research, you often find the biggest insights in the outliers, or the things that don't get brought back to the average or to the mean. So there's all sorts of risks around missing the insights that are represented with different target populations because of the training data. There's risks of kind of collapsing that knowledge you get back into a kind of vanilla gray median. There's a lot of challenges in that for sure.
I think that that's a really good point. In our human research hallways, we want all types of people involved in research. We have big inclusion and diversity efforts going on all over the world right now to try to broaden our hallways. We need the same to be true and in the hallways that build the technology, so that they build different kinds of people and their needs into their process, but also our role in the curation of really good training data is more important than it has ever been. And our role in looking at data and seeing if what we're going to apply it to is fit, if that data is representative, really understanding the weak spots in the data and being open and transparent about those when we start to use the data, that is so important. And we're only going to be as strong as we can possibly be if we're transparent about that and build to correct it. And it's a real skill set too. So that training data will erode some of that flatness if it's really good, beautifully built, carefully constructed training data, fresh, representative, and then if we involve everybody in the process and testing our tools, right, across lots of populations. As much as we're building them as quickly as we can and starting to use them, we should constantly be testing and parallel testing the tools themselves to make sure that we're improving them as society changes.
So there's an interesting thought here in the Q&A tool. So the future of qual research is AI empathetic agent moderators interviewing AI agent respondents to gain an, in quotes, authentic understanding of a research audience. Any grounds for this fear, do you think?
Well, I mean, the two sides of some pretty big developments, autonomous qualitative interviewing with empathy, and synthetic participants that are generated from, like you say, training data that's previously collected. I think that, it might be interesting in certain specific circumstances to have these things talk to each other to see what emerges, but it's not going to be the future of, understanding people if you really want to get to those differentiating insights. So it's, maybe if somebody's got no budget and they just need some made up data to stick in a presentation, I'm sure you'll get some dodgy marketers will make that call, but that's not really the future where we're heading.
Yeah, I think that really good training data will always have to be based on really good primary current data, right? So one of the problems with some of the training data sets that are out there right now is that they're just too old and they don't reflect sentiment of current society. The only way you're going to erode that is to constantly fill it with training data that is real and primary and keep it current. So the only way that we would ever get to empathetic AI agents talking to AI agent respondents is if you had a perfect data set in real time that was fed with primary data. And so then you're still going to need primary data to feed it. So yeah, that's my point of view. And you can, for those of you who know me, you know, I was head of data at a company for a long time. So if I was building this at that company, I would say, yes, we can do these tools on top of it. It was still going to have to be a really great training data set sitting underneath it, fed and fueled by primary data.
So I'm going to give you two quick examples from health where people are doing that sort of thing, and it seems to me really sensible. So the first one is to do with behavior training in accident and emergency. So a lot of people turn up into the hospital, accident emergency, they're drunk, they're violent, and they've lost 5 fingers, so they need treating, or they've lost a whole hand or something like this. And people are experimenting with setting up the AI for the patients and then running through lots and lots of different scenarios of how you might talk to that patient. You can't do that in real life. And they are doing hundreds of hours of these scenarios to come up with ideas for things they could then try with real people and real patients to do. And in a similar vein, some of the people who are doing work with people who have got a lot of symptoms and stage 4 cancer, you can't interview those people for hundreds of hours. They're looking at different strategies. So again, setting up interviewing synthetic to get some ideas to try with real people, you can see why that makes sense. So that's moving forward. Really good point has come in. Isn't response quality still market researchers' dirty little secret? I don't think with the work of people like Melanie and the Global Data Quality Initiative, it's a secret, but it really is an issue. What can these AI systems help do with tackling the quality?
Well, AI and algorithms and machine learning are all being used even now to improve existing data sets and to look at participants as they come in and figure out if they're, you know, actual humans or not. So there is actually, that's probably my biggest hope for AI, honestly, is what it can do to improve the quality of and the identification of real people coming into research, and what it can do to improve the quality of the data sets themselves. We've always used, you know, analytics to impute and infer and to improve a data set, and the tools that are out there now will allow us to take that to a place we've never taken it before. But you know, it's always, quality is always going to be a work in progress for our profession. It just is. And we have these point in times where it peaks and it becomes a real pain point, and then we have to evolve our tools and tricks and trade in order to offset some of the problems that are creeping in from badly intended people. But it's always going to be a work in progress. And so AI hopefully will allow us to automate a lot more than we automate right now, and then will allow us to respond quicker. But I do not believe it's a secret anymore, to your point. AI is also going to allow us to do our first ever benchmarks on data quality. You know, we're getting a bunch of data in right now. If you're not familiar with the data quality and the benchmark exercise that's going on, go to globaldataquality.org. But so we're doing a benchmark exercise right now to actually set benchmarks for fraud, benchmarks for length of interview, use of secure in links, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then we're going to hopefully work with the profession to improve on those benchmarks and make it a very quantitative conversation rather than qualitative in this specific area. And AI is going to help us along that path. So I'm really excited about it. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of little tools within the AI toolbox that can help to, you know, identify different patterns of response, different gibberish, filter people out, use them in trap questions for, you know, for quant research. And so I think there's a lot of, you know, like you say, you know, you don't have a silver bullet for this stuff. You have lots and lots of different practices that try and identify, you know, like the IP sourcing and all of those different kind of duplicate things. So I think AI has got a strong role to play in helping to improve data quality. I think it's also got a role to play in, you know, this might be controversial, but reducing the amount of pointless surveys that get done as well, because there's an enormous amount of things get put into surveys to gather data that doesn't need to happen because it's either obvious or the data's already been collected, or we can model it with very high levels of confidence using a language model. So there's lots of different benefits, I think, where, you know, we'd like to get to kind of fewer, better quality survey responses, I think, is my view.
Brilliant. Okay, we've run out of time and we do have quite a few more questions. So I'm just going to add one comment and then make a request of Melanie and Mike. So somebody asked about a direct comparison between platforms. We don't do that on NewMR. You might want to go to Insight Platforms to find out more information around a whole range of platforms. So Mike and Melanie, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray.
Happy to do
Pleasure.
it. Thank you very much for having me today.